Before we begin today's video, I'd like to give a shout out to 3 of our newest subscribers. FaZe Panther, Taraga Andy, and Patrick Lamandini. Thank you all for subscribing, and welcome to the family. And now on with today's video. Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Drayon, and welcome back to Pathfinder Hero Frame, where we take a look at the different ancestries and see what backgrounds and classes best fit those ancestries based on the lore provided in their respective books. Today we are looking at the Minotaur from Howl of the Wild. And I do apologize for the extremely late video. Been suffering from a little bit of fatigue, and possibly a few other things, but mostly fatigue. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I believe this is the last ancestry, or was it another one? Oh, right, there was that beetle guy. We'll be taking a look at them next time. But anyway, today we are looking at Minotaur, which actually keep to the original Greek inspiration, unlike the Centaur, who was a melting pot of different cultures, which was phenomenal. But the Minotaur is still rather interesting, as it does have a few tweaks and adjustments based on Pathfinder lore, but we still have mostly the same thing from their original Greek mythos. But there are actually 2 different variations on the curse. The first one was actually the evil deity known as Labrynths giving a 2-headed calf to a group of Aslanti people. But the Aslanti people in that sector killed the 2-headed calf out of, I guess, fear? Or just because they didn't like Labrynths, I don't quite know. But Labrynths did not take kindly to the slaughtering of this gift that she gave to these people, and cursed the firstborn to become Minotaurs. Which, I mean, that's petty, but yeah, I get it. You gave someone a gift and they kind of just spat in your face. Labrynths might be an evil deity, but I kind of understand where she's coming from with that one. The second gift, the second origin story, which is pretty similar to the Greek mythos, is that a mason worker was given visions from a quote-unquote hero god. And unfortunately, this guy misunderstood the images of twisting spires, charging bulls, and a warrior standing firm, and thought that the bull was the hero god's favored animal. Unfortunately, the god was angry because, well, he hated bulls, apparently, and wasn't his favorite animal, and so he cursed the unfortunate mason, who probably should have gone to Joseph instead of just guessing. If you're a Bible nerd, you'll probably get that reference. But yeah, those are the 2 different origins. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what we do know about the Minotaur. We have the following heritages: Ghost Bull Minotaur, Glacier Cavern Minotaur, Little Horn Minotaur, not Lighthorn, Roaming Minotaur, Slab Soul Minotaur, and Stalker Minotaur. all are very interesting, and the Ghost Bull Minotaur seems to clue into us that there is some sort of spiritual aspect to the Minotaur culture. Minotaurs actually don't serve any gods, per se. There are the odd few that will, but we will get more into that later. More often than not, when there is a magical Minotaur, the Minotaur is actually going to either be an oracle, thaumaturge, or sorcerer, but will take up wizardry. Minotaurs love mazes, both physical and psychological. So at least we have that going for them. As for other classes, common classes would include the Barbarian, Druid, Fighter, and Inventor, as well as the Investigator. Another class that I think would fit would be the Kineticist of either Elemental Earth or Metal. This is mostly in reference to the Slab Soul Minotaur heritage, since they are geomancers of sorts. For backgrounds, we actually did not get any listed within Howl of the Wild, so I actually had to go through and see which ones would actually fit with the lore of the Minotaur. And here are the ones that I think would best fit. Alloy Smith, Archaeologist, Artisan, Child of Notoriety, Codebreaker, Detective, Farmhand, Farmsteader, Fightbreaker, Fortune Teller, Gladiator, Herbalist, Hermit, Hunter, Miner, Occult Librarian, Scholar, Scholar of the Ancients, to tie into that Aslanti origin, Scout, Seer of the Dead, Trailblazer, Warrior, Wanderlust, and Winter's Child, to sort of reference that Glacier Cavern Minotaur. Now, with that being said, why don't we go ahead and take a look at the different subclasses and see which one of them will fit best with the Minotaur. Starting things off with the Alchemist, it is pretty basic, but the research field of the Chirurgeon would fit as well with the Minotaur as it would with any other race. But another research field that I thought would work would be the Mutagenist, mostly as a reference to that origin of Lemashtu kind of cursing the firstborn of the Aslanti to be born as Minotaurs. When you have a deity that finds beauty in mutations and imperfection, but finds true beauty to be hideous, you kinda have a good argument for this type of research field. Moving on to the Barbarian, probably one of the more common classes to pick. For instincts, it made most sense to go with the animal as well as the elemental, mostly the elements of earth and metal. I also decided to go with the spirit instinct, mostly as a reference to those ghost bull minotaurs being able to commune with the spirits. Next is the Bard, and the muses that would best fit a Minotaur would of course be the Enigma, but as well as the Warrior and Zoophonia. There is actually a heritage feat, or not an ancestry feat, that lets you talk with cattle, which is pretty interesting, and probably would fit in with this Bard of Zoophonia. Moving on to the Cleric. Not going to be the most common class to pick for a Minotaur, but it definitely would make sense for a Cleric Minotaur to have the deities of Iorori and Nethys, which are the two deities that are recommended. Which is weird because you'd think Lamashtu would be listed as well, considering some of the lore. And My D&D players are probably thinking the same thing I did, but why isn't Baphomet listed in the Minotaur's list of deities? And, well, that's the weird part. According to Baphomet's entry, he is the demon lord of Labrynths and Minotaurs. But he isn't listed among the deities that Minotaurs serve. I think that might just be a smidge of a addition change to try to move Minotaurs away from demonic influence, but it is still there. Baphomet is still listed as a demon lord of Minotaurs. So it's not completely a retcon, but they are kind of turning the lore away from that sort of reference. But anyway, Aurori and Nethys are the two most common deities for Minotaurs to worship. But I also made sure to list Baphomet, the Lord of the Labyrinth, as well as Lemashtu for the purposes of lore origins. You probably won't see too many Minotaurs serving these evil deities, but they are still worth listing. Moving on to the Druid. The Druidic orders that made the most sense were, of course, Animal, Stone, and the Untamed. Though you'll probably see more Druids of the Druidic Order of Stone because of the Masonry and the innate connection to stone. Next is the Investigator. Like I mentioned, Minotaurs love mazes and puzzles, so it would make sense for them to take up the Investigator class. For methodology, the empiricism and interrogation seemed to fit the most. Moving on to the Magus, another class that's probably not that common, but still more common than the Cleric. I actually couldn't really think of any hybrid studies that would fit with the Minotaur other than Inexorable Iron. Moving on to the Oracle. The ancestries that made the most sense were, of course, going to be ancestors, since they have those ties to their ancestral lineage, as well as battle and lore, again referencing their love of mazes and puzzles, as well as those couple of ties to those two deities that I mentioned for the Cleric. Moving on to the Rogue, the rackets that made the most sense here were the Mastermind and the Ruffian. Again, they are very intelligent creatures, but they are also very muscular, so having the racket of Mastermind and Ruffian did make sense. Moving on to Sorcerer, tying into the original lore in 1st edition with Baphomet, the bloodline demonic made sense, but also the elemental bloodline of stone and iron. And finally, the class of Wizard with the arcane schools of Ars Grammatica, Battle Magic, and Mentalism seem to make the most sense for a Minotaur character. And with that being said, that is all the time I have for you today. What did you think about the Minotaur? And what type of character would you create using this ancestry? Let me know in the comment section down below. And until next time, this has been Drahan, and I am offline.